I was watching this Tim Pool video, and he mentioned some stuff that has to do with affirmative action, and I realized that I don't really know a whole lot about affirmative action. I knew the gist of what it was. So I asked my good friends at Reddit, r/social justice 101, to help me out. I also went to Destiny's Reddit, because I knew for a fact there was some people there that were anti-affirmative action, and I wanted to have a discussion with them. The discussion was interesting, but I'm not going to go over that right now, or maybe even ever. I just want to go over the stuff, the general gist of everything I learned when it comes to affirmative action. So I asked r/social justice 101. I started out with the fact that Yale University is being accused by the DOJ of discriminating against Asians and whites in their application process. I looked up the legality of affirmative action, and at least when it comes to higher education, the Supreme Court has consistently held that affirmative action is constitutional under strict scrutiny as long as you are doing it to increase diversity, and you can prove that the increase in diversity will be beneficial to your organization. So that's what the Supreme Court has said. There are some other caveats, like you have to prove that you have already exhausted all non-race based options before you start selecting based off of race, stuff like that. So I asked this Reddit, basically, how do you justify affirmative action? Is there anything I'm missing when it comes to the legality of it? Those types of questions. So this guy, U/USAAR33, USAR33, has some great information for me. And I'll link the sources that he gave to me, or they gave to me, in the description. Alright, so basically, my conclusion on affirmative action is I support it, both to help increase diversity in schools, which is the only legal justification for affirmative action, but I also support it because historically in this country, minorities have been oppressed simply due to the color of their skin, and that historical oppression has led to them being economically and socially left behind. It has disallowed them to be able to successfully as other races, particularly the white race, qualify for many of the elite especially, but many of other less elite higher educational opportunities. Because if you think about it, if you come from a wealthier family, or at least a middle class family living in the suburbs or a rural area, where your family has given you a good education, has given you opportunities to go to extracurriculars, and has given you the means to actually be able to do your schoolwork and such without having to work a job while doing it, you are significantly ahead of the curve than somebody who has to, after school, go home and take care of the siblings because your mom's working 2 jobs and still can't afford daycare. Just examples like that. And the black community are disproportionately more likely to have to go home and take care of their little siblings, disproportionately not able to afford daycare, disproportionately not able to send their kids to preschool, disproportionately not able to let your kids do extracurricular activities. So when it comes to doing things like taking the SATs, black kids end up doing poorer on average than white kids. Therefore, they're going to qualify for less elite schools, if any at all. Their GPAs tend to be lower. Therefore, they're going to qualify for less schools, if any at all. They're not going to have the opportunity to do extracurriculars. Therefore, they're going to qualify for less schools, if any at all. So what ends up happening is a school will have, and I'm going to make up all these numbers and just pull them out of my rear end because I don't know what the reality of the numbers are. But a school will have a limited amount of slots that they are able to take in their freshman class. And let's just say, for simplicity's sake, that amount of slots is 10. And you have 3 applicants that are black that meet all your qualifications. You have 12 applicants that are white that meet all your qualifications. Well, you could fill that entire slot, all those slots with white applicants if you wanted to. Or you can fill it with 3 of the black students and then fill the rest with white and whatever other ethnic groups you're trying to fill those slots with. But what would happen is, if you did that, you would end up with a situation to where, let's just say it was just blacks versus whites in this one. When it comes to observing what % chance a black person who qualifies has compared to a white person who qualifies into making it. If there are 12 white people and 3 black people, and those 3 black people, all 3 of them get in, now there's only 7 slots left. And if you were black and qualified, you had a 100% chance of getting in. But if you were white and qualified, you can only fill 7 slots now because the black students have already taken 3. And there were 12 of you. So you only had a 58% chance of getting in. And that is what I think the Yale situation is. Because in the DOJ letter to Yale, they say, for example, the likelihood of admissions for Asian American and white applicants who have similar academic credentials is significantly lower for African American and than for African American and Hispanic applicants to Yale College. Yes, that would happen if you have a lot more white students and Asian students qualifying than you do black and Hispanics. My overly simplified example earlier kind of proved that. You can take those numbers to the extreme and still prove that. So, yeah, I'm not really sure what other options that they would want. I know that when I asked Destiny's Reddit, I had one guy give a argument against affirmative action. I think that he was acting in very good faith. His suggestion was, just make it a lottery. If you have 10 slots, 12 white kids, 3 black kids, and they all have equal credentials, which is what the DOJ letter is comparing, students of equal credentials, pull their names out of a hat. To which my argument against that was, on an individual level, each person has equal opportunity to get in. Each person has a 1 out of 15, in my example, chance of getting in with that first draw. And then each person after that has a 1 and a 14 chance of getting in the next draw. and so on and so forth until you get through to 10 seats. And on an individual level, that is the fairest way. But when you look at on a community level, that is not going to be the fairest way. And the example that I gave was, again, using the black community. It is well known amongst my side of the aisle that the black community was systematically oppressed just because of the color of their skin and blah blah blah. I went through this earlier. Because of the systematic oppression that happened in the past, and to some extent this still happens today, black students aren't able to qualify for college admissions in elite colleges and as elite colleges as white students are. So let's say you have, the example that I gave was 1 in 5. For every 1 black student, there's 5 white students in an elite school. That means that for every 1 black student that graduates in elite school and gets a good job because of his elite education, there's going to be 5 white students who get a good job because of their elite education. And that means for every 1 black person who's got the means to send their kids to a good school, live in a good district, allow them to have extracurriculars because you have the money for daycare, this, that, and the other thing, there's going to be 5 white people's kids who are able to do that. And that means when the next generation comes along and applies to these elite schools, for every 1 black student's kid that are qualified for these elite schools, there's going to be 5 white students' kids. And it just perpetuates the oppression that the black community has seen in the past that has disallowed them to be able to qualify for these schools. I hope I'm making sense. Basically, while a lottery system is the fairest way of doing things on an individual level, it perpetuates oppression of minority groups who aren't able to qualify for schools, higher education as much as the majority populations are. A little tidbit that I want to add on: affirmative action does negatively affect white people and Asians on an individual level. But if people actually cared about the applicants and their chances of making it in based off of merit and not race, then they would care much more about legacy and donor preferences when it comes to college admissions. The act of having more white people there based off of donor and legacy preferences also hinders general applicants' ability to make it in an affirmative action school, because those spots are already taken by white people who have donor and legacy preferences. That is the much more egregious practice that universities do when it comes to accepting applicants, and that is the one that I think everybody should be railing against, because there is no benefit to any type of minority group in legacy and donor preferences whatsoever. Maybe there are individual minorities that benefit from it, but as a whole, the communities do not benefit. At least with affirmative action, most minority communities, with the exception of Asians, can benefit.